CIPS
Africa. From Cape to Cairo, Lagos to Nairobi, we are uniting professionals, thought leaders, and change agents across industries, borders, and cultures. As leaders in procurement, we are guided by global standards and deep local insights, understanding that procurement is not just about processes, it's about purpose, partnership, and creating sustainable value across Africa's diverse economies. Whether you're navigating complex supply chain challenges, spearheading transformation in your organization, or just beginning your procurement journey, you're in the right place.
The wait is almost over.
CIPS Africa Connect and Engage podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply Africa's podcast series. It's a great pleasure to be in your company, and it is a great pleasure today because it is our inaugural episode. We are going to be, over the next couple of episodes, getting to know quite intimately a professional body that is doing incredible work in the space of procurement and supply. This podcast is not just for professionals or practitioners, it's also for the everyday person that seeks to know just how your steak got onto your dinner table. Or if you're wearing your favorite item, do you know the exact value chain and how it got to come about? And so, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please help me to give a warm welcome to Ben Farrell, who is the Global CEO of CIPS, as well as Paul Vos, who is the Managing Director of CIPS Africa. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast this episode. Maybe we can start with some definitions or introducing our audience to CIPS from a global perspective and a continental perspective. Ben, let me start with you. Who or what is CIPS from a global perspective?
Very cool to be here. Thank you for inviting me to join the very first CIPS Africa podcast. I've had a brilliant time in Africa in the last 40 days, actually. So more of that in a second. But first on procurement, the origins of CIPS and what it is today. Formed in 1932 with interest in promoting the skills, trading competence, capabilities around global purchasing and supply, as it was called at the time. And that has brought us to today. So to describe CIPS today, we have members in nearly every nation, 180 countries we have members in. We have 97 branches of CIPS around the world. The latest branches are in Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan in the last couple of months. And we have tens of thousands of members. We have 10 offices around the world, and that's including a couple that we are literally just opening in Africa, in establishing a permanent presence in Nigeria. We've had a branch in Nigeria since 2003, I think, or 2004 perhaps. And then we're going to open and establish a permanent presence in East Africa. So in the next few days, I'm heading that way to spend time there. So we are the global professional body with chartered status to promote the art of science and the art and science of procurement supply, with a mandate which includes sort of organisational and individual skills development, ethical standards. We maintain the global standard for procurement and supply training. So this is the bar that people are expected to reach, to be designated after their names with the post-nominals MCIPS, which means you are internationally credible. You are a member of the only organisation in the world that has this responsibility. So we've got global reach, and that allows us to do a number of things, not least maintain the standards, share best practice, share knowledge, which is slightly what we've been doing here really, but also allows us to be the voice of the profession and comment on what's going on in the world. And in the last day or so, I've been talking a lot here about the impact of tariffs on South Africa, for example. So typically, you would see a professional body as the voice of the profession, and we are that voice around the world.
A very rich history and heritage, and as you rightfully mentioned, that global footprint that also spreads across the African continent. Ben, I do understand that when you have a CIPS accreditation, you can go anywhere in the world, people. So you can take your accreditation and literally set up shop anywhere.
You really can. And when I've been in, recently I was in New Zealand actually, and I was really surprised by the number of foreign nationals who are in the senior positions in procurement in New Zealand, for example. So they're CIPS qualified. That resonates wherever you go with procurement professionals. And increasingly what I'm seeing is two things. The growing number of people in the profession, so we think that's growing at about 10% a year. There are 13 million people in the world, if you looked on LinkedIn and did a scrape of all those with procurement supply in their name, who are involved in this profession. And we think that's growing at about 10% a year. And this is a story of a growing profession. But also, perhaps more interestingly for everybody, we do an annual salary survey around the world where we understand what's going on around people's remuneration for procurement supply. And if you've got MCIPS, you are typically paid 52% on average more than those without the designation. So there is a massive financial imperative to continue with your personal and professional development.
I guess it's safe to say that I'm in the wrong profession. Paul,
it's never too late. That's the thing to say.
It's never too late.
Yeah.
Paul, when we look at the continental or continental view or overview, please introduce our viewers and our listeners to CIPS Africa.
So, as Ben said, I mean, obviously, CIPS was established in 1932, and throughout that period, since up until the early 2000s, has had a presence in Africa, but not necessarily a formal presence. So, the CIPS Africa operation was actually formally established in 2009. So we've only really had a permanent footprint in a permanent office in South Africa or in Southern Africa since 2009. That being said, our penetration throughout the continent is quite substantial. Ben referred to the global population of 13 million. If you consider that across the African continent, we've currently got around 17,000 members, and of those 17,000, 11,000 come from the Southern African region, which is the region that we run from South Africa. It's an impressive number. So I think, and to Ben's point around the 10% growth, our growth in this region from a membership perspective actually surpasses that and has surpassed that over the last couple of years. So the aspiration around the CIPS brand and what CIPS does and what CIPS offers is tremendous. And we don't, we talk around the spaces that CIPS plays in, and we are both we play both in the public and the private sector. So neither one of those sectors is particularly predominant. The split's probably 55%, 45%. So the value that we add is across both the public and the private sector. And as as we said, that the penetration is enormous. And in fact, CIPS did a survey, a market, some market analysis, a global marketing survey around brand perception and the perception of the CIPS brand globally. And the Southern Africa and East Africa regions performed best in terms of the brand perception of CIPS. So it just speaks to the value that the African continent places in what CIPS does and what CIPS offers. We have, if we look at the media, the term procurement is very often associated with negative stories, and we all, in South Africa certainly we're very familiar with the state capture situation and the Zondo report. But the upside from that is really around the opportunity for professionalization. And what we're seeing is with some of the entities that were affected by state capture is this desire for engagement to professionalize. And particularly in an environment where ethics is becoming so important and transparency is becoming so important, we see that there's a hunger with certainly in the public sector for professionalization. So we're really in a sweet spot. As negative as the connotations were around the state capture years, it did show that the need for professional bodies like CIPS, and it wasn't just our profession that was affected, but certainly we were, procurement was at the intersection of where some of the corruption was happening, and what it really has amplified the need for what it is we offer, and we are definitely experiencing that firsthand. and are very excited in terms of the opportunities that we have, not just in South Africa, pan-regionally and across the continent, to do the same. So the appetite for what we do is tremendous, and I honestly believe that although we've been here, been around since 1932, we've barely scratched the surface,
Sure.
and there's a lot of opportunity for us to make a real contribution towards professionalisation and raising the public confidence in the profession, particularly in the public sector.
I actually think all of those things are true. The prosperity of nations is at play with this. When you think about public sector procurement. So we're helping in Nigeria, for example. We've signed an MOU with the Bureau of Public Procurement there. Recently, we're going to help write the Nigerian procurement strategy, national procurement strategy. So there's so much in all of this, but I honestly think this is a very responsible way to spend money, to be well-trained, well-skilled, and competent and up-to-date.
Yeah, for the benefit of our viewers, CIPS Africa just hosted a conference over 2 days on the 6th and the 7th of August under the theme Connect and Engage, which saw participants raise these issues, right, of trust, of professionalization of the industry. It spoke of a lot of things that have to do with development. So what are we connecting and engaging for, which has got to do with the development of nations? And so, Ben, what also came out of the conference, you mentioned ethics a little bit earlier on, and a keynote speaker, in fact, the Deputy Commissioner of the South African Revenue Services mentioned, he showed pictures of the sheer devastation of what happens when the wrong decisions are made. To use his word, someone somewhere out there literally made a decision, and that decision resulted rather in decay. And so when we speak of ethics, why is it important? Maybe we can expand on that.
Yeah. I think at the heart of this is the notion about trust, isn't it? People would want to work with you, do business with you, create organizations where there's an atmosphere of trust for everybody's long-term success. I think the examples that you were shining a light on today were where people had, with malign intent, established contracts perhaps with their best interest as opposed to organizations' best interest. So there was short-term benefit for a few people as opposed to the long-term benefit for many. And so you've seen that a little bit here. And we have a set of ethical standards, and every year, as an organization, you can get an ethical kite mark to show you're committed and your staff are committed to training and thinking about ethical standards of procurement throughout. If you went wound the clock back to 1932 when CIPS was formed, like all sort of British things, the first thing the guys did when they did it was create a crest and a coat of arms. But if you look to the detail of the coat of arms, procurement's changed, the world has changed, all these things. But in the coat of arms, it was all established around protecting value, protecting a moral code about trading with people you trust. So deep at the heart of this lies the notion of trust and ethical standards. And if you establish that, you will do great business. So we go, I think probably, often say, irrespective of your skills, your knowledge, whatever happens, if you come at it from a point of view, you can be a trusted individual organisation, you have a chance of establishing a good business.
Yeah, Paul, Ben speaks of skills, which is what we heard as well during the conference in August, that it was brought up, the issue of skills, which is what you mentioned a little bit earlier on in terms of professionalization. What does it allow you to do more so when you are CIPS accredited, right, in terms of having a seat at the table and influencing the trajectory or the growth trajectory of not just your organization, but the country at large?
Listen, that's quite a loaded question. There's a lot in there. So let me start first and foremost with interesting statistic around the practitioners, is that at a previous conference that we went to, we polled the room in terms of how many of the professionals in the room had chosen the profession and how many of them were seconded or found themselves in that profession. less than half the room raised their hands in terms of it being a chosen profession. So in terms of that skill set is that we have people within the procurement and supply chain function who have come from outside of formal training in procurement and supply chain, which means that yes, they bring other skills from the other departments and the other parts of the organizations that they've been working in. But there is a skills gap in terms of the professionalization of those particular individuals within those organizations. So while we have a vast pool of practitioners, there is a skills gap amongst those practitioners in terms of their technical and professional capabilities. Now, what we do as CIPS is we work with organizations and we do assessments and we do analytics and we go into organizations and we do diagnostics in terms of the capacity and the skills capabilities. And then what we do is it's not done in order to name and shame. It has the opposite intention completely. It's basically to go into organizations, determine exactly where the skills gaps lie, and then create bespoke solutions for those particular organizations or public sector entities around what the potential solutions are. So we're not trying to square peg round hole CIPS into an organization or into an SOE. What we're trying to do is we're trying to establish exactly where the capacity constraints and skills gaps lie, and then through a pragmatic process and normally a long-term process. Some of the contracts that we work in the public sector are multi-year programs. They run for 5, 6 years because it's a marathon. It's a journey. It's not, and in fact, we actually never get to the destination because there's a constant need to upskill and with things like AI, new technologies, and the issues around the current geopolitics and things like that. Our role as CIPS is really to empower and to give those professionals and those practitioners the skills to cope in an era where we're in such a changeable environment. So yes, there is a skills gap. However, there's a big opportunity that we see CIPS fulfilling in terms of walking the journey with the practitioners, and not just in terms of creating an environment where they can grow within their particular roles, but also attracting new talent to the industry as well. So we have a responsibility. There's this theory around this question I was asked recently around who is coaching you, who is your peer group, and who are you coaching? And I think we're trying to sort of advocate for that type of approach in terms of how the profession operates. Is that we're not operating in a vacuum. So are we being coached? Are we taking on board best practice? Are we networking with the right peer groups? Are we talking to the right people in terms of the levels in which we're operating? And then are we imparting what we know? Are we distilling what we know and sharing what we know for the next generation so we can build capacity in terms of future generations? So as I said, it was I hope that answered your question, but there's a lot going on there in terms of it's not just a skills gap. There's a whole program in terms of what we need to do to elevate the profession and raise the profile of the profession and create a pipeline, a future pipeline, so that we that there's demand in terms of skills for procurement and supply chain professionals.
So laying that foundation and that groundwork and essentially asking the question, are we connecting and engaging? Ben, there was also a theme that rose quite prominently during the discussions, and you mentioned the future, Paul. What will the future look like? Because as things stand with global geopolitics, with some countries being accused of having protectionist policies, we've got trade tensions that are also playing themselves out while we also have conflicts. You do believe, though, that the stars are aligned for the profession in the midst of all of this.
Thank
How
you.
so?
The stars are aligned for procurement and supply to thrive as a necessity for the future of the world we live in. So think about this. There are two parts of this. In 2050, it's estimated the global population is going to be 9.7 billion people, up from 8 billion now. And 1 in 4 people will be African, by the way. And of that population, vast aging population, with advances in medical care, and imagine the demands on just things like food, water, energy, etc. So to make that world work, the supply of those will be preeminent, and the necessity to do those in a cost-effective way, because otherwise people just pay more and more taxation to live in this world. So you've got that as a backdrop and a future coming. And also look at business today and connect the dots between the two. So the biggest global organizations like Apple and Alibaba and now Renault have just announced that their CEO is going to be someone with a procurement supply background, because businesses today are essentially big supply chains, amalgamating components, manufacturing those and passing them on to the customers. So the world is so interconnected that this skill set of being able to bring things together in great big supply chains and manage those effectively. So that's connecting the world and engaging the supply base, the suppliers and the different organizations needed to produce the outcome. Vast number of organizations. So I personally well past the idea that an organization on its own is responsible for its success. There are so many different contributory factors that participate into delivering success for an organization. So the skills of connecting and engaging to deliver the outcome are ever more evident. So take that as the nature of the world we live in today and increasingly in the future. The other part is about the skills of procurement and supply. So we mentioned earlier we've got 97 branches around the world. There's a chance for procurement professionals to connect and engage with one another. Where I've seen extraordinary things in AI happening, for example, in the port of Singapore, we can share that through knowledge share across the world, and we can talk about the lessons we're seeing, case studies. So the rapid dissemination of skills and knowledge around the world is only going to drive prosperity and competence to everybody's advantage in nations, in businesses. So that's why connecting and engaging is so an important, such a good theme for the conference in Johannesburg.
Driving prosperity and competence, which is also a theme that came about in some of the keynote addresses, more so competence. Paul, as we wind down the conversation, perhaps you can speak to young people of the continent, right? Because as Ben rightfully mentioned, in the near future, 1 in 4 people will be from the continent. And when we speak, more so, Ben, to your point earlier on about driving development, what is it that young people need to know about this profession, and why should they choose CIPS Africa?
Look, I think it's as much as it's that the youth need to know, I think we also need to tell. So I think the responsibility starts with us as an organisation in terms of the profile and the and talking about what we do. I think one of the things that Ben and I have been discussing over the last couple of days is around some of the work that we do that just goes unseen and unnoticed, because we look at it as BAU. It's part of what we do. It's part of what CIPS does. But we have a lot of work that we do on the African continent in terms of healthcare. We have donor-funded work that we're doing in East and West Africa that has had a profound effect on improving people's livelihoods and lifestyles and their longevity. So we don't necessarily talk enough about that. So I think we have a responsibility first and foremost to just maybe to be a bit more outgoing and a bit more vocal about the work that we're doing to raise the profile of it, so that people that are looking at potential career opportunities can say, wow, this is a really impactful and meaningful role. I think that we have to move the conversation away from buying and being a cost-driven profession. That's not what we are. We are highly strategic. The value that procurement professionals add to organization is substantial. And as Ben says, and you mentioned in terms of the stars aligning, we really are at a key junction in terms of the contribution we can make. So our role as CIPS is really to elevate the profile so that we can attract the attention of the youth. And then on the flip side of that, to answer your question in terms of what the youth can do, is ask questions, be inquisitive. you know, that iPhone that you have, that latest iPhone 16 or the Samsung equivalent, whatever it is.
No one knows.
Where does it come from? You know, where does it come
Right.
from? And you know, the fact that you have an iPhone, and do you know that the silicone, where's the silicone mined from? And how does it get to the production plant where it's then manufactured and turned into the components for your cell phone?
Yeah, and it's all absolutely bang on. I'd like to build on that. You know, I've traveled the world and I've met people who say to me, I love what I do. And literally the passion. If I could somehow work out whether retention relative to other professions is any better, I would bet a year's pay that the retention in procurement is the best. People absolutely love it. So somehow got to shout to those younger generations looking at what they might do. This is a fabulous place to spend your time. Not only because people love it, but the prospects are fabulous as well. So it's a really compelling case. We just haven't done well enough at sharing that, I don't think, yet. So that's one of our big jobs as a voice of the profession.
And
Yeah.
And I guess this is where it starts.
What did you hear today, though? You must have...
It was an incredibly fascinating couple of days. I think for me, more so because I am passionate about the development of the African continent, right? I've done a little bit of travels on the continent and things that you see. So like from movement, right? So you take to get to West Africa, a country in West Africa, I sometimes have to travel quite far out to then come back in, right? And some of the things that you experience on a daily basis just don't make sense. And so I got to see or to really experience the power behind things just working seamlessly to the point of competence, right? So when we speak about competence, so making things work, making things seamless for the continent. And I got to experience, or I got to learn that there are people behind it.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about artificial intelligence during the conference, and what came out is that, yes, you've got these machines and you've got data, but humans feed the machines.
Totally.
And so we're the ones who are shaping this world together with AI. So it was quite fascinating.
It is an interesting conversation and so many sparks whizzing around my head to share with you. Can I just, because I love Africa, and I wanted just to share with you because about competence and capability building, because I really believe there's so much to do, but the possibilities are immense. Paul mentioned we've got this team doing Health Procurement Africa. They're working in 8 states. This is in Nigeria particularly because I was close to the team. 8 states in Nigeria where they're improving the procurement of drugs to help with infant mortality. They have improved availability of the drugs at the point of need. They've reduced the price, I think, by half of these drugs. And they're saving lives because of better procurement. And I think, we're spreading that. So what happens then is that best practice is shared with other states, and we want to say to the Nigerian government we've been talking to, let's do it across other sectors as well. So the possibilities are enormous. That saves a bucket load of money. The health minister said to me in Nigeria, he has $14 per Nigerian, 230 million, to provide healthcare. But imagine that's not enough money, is it? We all know that's not enough money. But if we do that really effectively, that goes so much to people, to saving lives, to helping people having a better life. So this is at the heart of this lies, a bigger ambition about, as you say, the prosperity and the growth of nations and the growth of Africa as well. It's all there. I really believe it. And you can see when I talk to whichever country I go to, the ambition is so massive. And we just got to try and unlock that in a way that delivers. There's a lot of conversation about Pan-Africanism, and yet there was a conversation about how do we actually get to the point of saying we're unlocking that opportunity, which is interesting.
I think it's also around supporting, as Ben was saying, but national priorities. That's so for a youngster coming in to looking to make a difference. And to really have a profound influence on the societies and the communities that we work in. There's a massive opportunity to do that. You can do that. You can profoundly impact on your communities by coming into the profession, because you can see there's a direct correlation, as Ben was saying, between the work we do around professionalization and the impact that it has on those communities. So I would say that if you're looking for and there's multiple ways. Also, there's multiple points of entry as well. So I've spoken about the fact that a lot of the professionals have been seconded or have come from other professions. But for a youngster coming in, there's different pathways as well. So there's not just one route. We look at RPL, so we recognise previous learning. Also, we look at we have agreements with a number of universities recognising their qualifications as well. So there's multiple ways in which youngsters can join the CIPS community and the CIPS ecosystem, and it's very important to have those options. And as I said, fundamentally, the impact that you can have as a young professional is quite profound. And I don't think there's many other professions that can claim that.
CIPS, is, as you rightfully mentioned, has got a body of work that has been produced. There's a wealth of knowledge that has been unearthed and mined. And I guess this is the start, right? Having these kinds of conversations and having these platforms to get that work out there and to get that work profiled. Before we say goodbye to our viewers, it would be terribly remiss of me, Paul, because you said you'd spend, I beg your pardon, Ben, you'd spend some 40 days already on the continent. Is that correct? In
the last 40 days, if I will have been to West Africa, South Africa, and East Africa by the time I finished. So I was trying to get an overall view of the continent.
And I won't ask you which one is your favorite region because we don't compete, we collaborate. But how has your stay been? What is it that you have observed where you say, this is why I do what I do. This is why I'm with CIPS. This is where I see that our work is working.
And you know what? I love my work. I genuinely do. And I've met in my few months, I've been just about 9 or 10 months now, a number of people who've said, I love CIPS. So the enthusiasm with which I am greeted is overwhelming, brilliant. When I arrived in Abuja, 4 o'clock in the morning, the CIPS volunteers were there to meet me and look after me. Phenomenal. They arranged a phenomenal trip. People said to me, do you want to go to Nigeria, this risky country? Do you know what I found? The kindest, most fun people who were dedicated, who I was going to meet the president, but the vice president of Brazil got ahead of me in the queue. So, hey,
okay.
I
Is it a BRICS meeting currently underway?
So, yes. So anyway, but the point was, right at the most every level, there was enthusiasm for our work, which I loved, and determination, what they described as creating the Dubai of Africa. So here we are in South Africa. I've visited twice in the last 9 months and found a similar determination. Some knotty problems everywhere you look, but a determination and resolve to overcome those, and also just great people who are very engaged and engaging and lovely people who want no more than to prosper in organizations on behalf of other people. There was a lot today in the conference was about creating success for other people, I noticed, and there was a lot about the consideration for others and concern. And Paul often talked to me when we were thinking about the impacts of the tariffs, about the level of unemployment here and how an individual can be supporting 10 people. And his mind went straight to the people and helping the people, which I find very, very engaging in Africa when people care about one another, which is really nice. And then people talk about the continent and the prosperity. I think if we can get the stars to align, as I believe they can, there's a prospect for Africa just to grow and boom. And there's a few things that need to fall into place in that. So going on to Kenya and Uganda, you can't really spend enough time here, can you? You can't do justice. I offer a quick summary of a few, days when actually it's a lifetime's work, really, isn't it?
From the pearl of Africa to West Africa, from East Africa to West Africa. Did you enjoy some of the jollof? Because there's a jollof war going on between Ghana and Nigeria, and so which one is the best?
To be honest with you, I kept getting asked about that, and I was trying to find my way. I went on Breakfast TV in Nigeria, and the first question they asked me was about that, and I said, it was very interesting and very nice to be met at the airport. I completely steered around the question, as I am going to now.
Safe bet. Very safe bet.
Can I just add something? Sorry to that. I think that it would be remiss of me not to mention our team. they say it takes a village, right? So we have a small team in the region, but every single one of them is dedicated to what we're doing and our objectives, and we align very. I call it the golden thread that runs from throughout CIPS as an organisation. We're all aligned in terms of what our objectives are, but we have a really strong and dedicated team here. So I need to give them credit.
Yeah, I think that's great, and they really do good work.
They do some fantastic work, and we are a small team, and then linked to that is Ben spoke about our volunteers and our members. Without them, they are basically our part of our infrastructure in not just in Africa but globally.
Yeah.
So our volunteer network is so important and so vital to us, and so important to the success that we're achieving in the region. So I just wanted to highlight those two very important key success factors that we have in the region.
And maybe we can expand on that, Ben, because when you mentioned development earlier, you spoke about the growing number of offices, or the offices that you are still to launch on the continent. Why was that important?
Thank you. I'm very enthusiastic about what we're doing here in Africa. So as I think I mentioned earlier, we are opening a permanent office in Abuja, and then we will be establishing a permanent presence in East Africa in Nairobi. But I should stress these are both regional offices for West Africa and East Africa. And there are a number of reasons, mostly about the pull and the desire we've heard articulated for development, capability building. I mentioned about our Health Procurement Africa being almost like a pilot to say, this is the case and we see a real opportunity, and people are saying, we need this skills development here. So there's a pull, and also, we definitely recognise, as a global professional body charged with developing the art and science of procurement, we need to be a presence in nations that are aspiring to do great things. So I think it's the right thing to do for us to be present to help contribute to that national development. And so that's why we're here, and we're going to get busy. And it's been an extremely tough choice as to where we can locate them. I want to give a nod to Botswana. Literally, they, I think, have the most impressive exam centre and study centre in Africa. They have the most students doing exams every year. So where we put the office is a bit difficult for lots of different reasons, but we've focused on regions rather than specific nations to service those. And in due course, as we go, we develop, there'll be other offices established, I'm sure. But this was, a pull and also a responsibility. I've always felt that we need to be in countries, nations and continents where there's a clear demand and desire.
You say it was a tough decision or a tough nod to decide where exactly to place them. Why?
Yeah. Oh, because there's so many cases to be present in lots of different nations. So we've got quite a number of branches around. I was talking to the CIPS guys in Zambia and Zimbabwe and Uganda. I'm going to see the guys so there are passionate, dedicated procurement professionals with CIPS credentials across the whole of Africa, and they're all saying, get busy in my nation. We've got lots to do, and we want to be busy everywhere, but we can't really afford to do that, to be honest. So we've got to go to where we think we're going to have the most impact and most regional reach, and that's what we've decided to do, to set ourselves up East and West Africa and South Africa for now, and this will be a continually evolving process as well.
Here's to another over 100 years of CIPS in Africa.
Bravo! That's what we're really committed to that, and I'm excited to see what's possible. Really, and we're talking to, in all of the African nations, there tends to be also organisations that might be the national professional body, and we want to collaborate and what I describe as be extrovert and inclusive. Talk with them. We're all trying to do similar things to develop nations and procurement and supply capacity and capability. So we want to talk to everybody about this and develop this collaboratively and collectively. We have a global standards. We have access to knowledge. We want to share that.
Long may it continue.
I think if I can just interject as well. So I think from our perspective, it's such a great and wonderful opportunity, because we are stretched quite thin in terms of our operations from our South African office. So it's really fantastic that we are opening up these offices in other parts of the continent, because it'll supplement the work that we've already been doing. We, from our offices, we've done work in about 28 different African countries. And as Ben said, we don't have the capacity to that's not sustainable. So it's really important to supplement the work that we've already started and that we've been involved with from this region by having those offices in those regions. It really just brings together the connecting and engaging the activities that we have across the continent with people that are in market. There is a demand for those skill sets to be based within regions and within markets. And so we're really excited in terms of the opportunities it's going to present to us as a Southern African region, to work more closely with those regions where we've got dedicated capacity and dedicated resources in those markets. So it's multifaceted in terms of why it's such a necessary thing for CIPS to do. And as Ben said, we're listening to what our members are saying. We're listening to what the market is saying. We work from here with, Ben's spoken about the various regulatory authorities. We work with multiple regulatory authorities, and we're engaging with for example, the African Public Procurement Network, for example, which is a Pan-African network. And it's important for us to have representation from CIPS, from within other markets, and have other voices that are adding to the conversation from CIPS, but from other parts of the continent. So it's very synergistic. It's really, it works well.
Can I add to that? So we know also we need to be really we've got a global standard, but we need to be locally relevant and really sensitive and understanding of what's going on. So, for example, in Angola, we have some of our training in Portuguese, Francophone Africa as well, in French and things like that. And I personally want to tell you, I've been learning Swahili. Oh. So I'm excited to go to Kenya because I'm going to try out my Swahili.
Right.
And everyone is look at me and go, what on earth is he talking about? But, I know it's important to be a global organization with local knowledge and relevance. So we need to combine all these things. And also, one last point on Africa. These countries are massive. 230 million in Nigeria. We've got one person at the moment building an office. So there's a big job to do everywhere. Yeah. And I look at it like the ink spot theory, ink on a blotting paper, and we're just going to spread out from there.
One of the most populous countries on the continent. And so, I guess it must start somewhere. Yeah. And that good work can only just replicate, right? Because in as much as, we mentioned negative connotations or narratives around the profession earlier on, but even the good, it can replicate. So as long as there is some good, that ink will then, I guess, spread throughout.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the demand is there. The demand is there. We, as I said, I've spoken about the examples that we have in this region, but there's demand, and there's we're listening to what our members are telling us, and we're listening to what governments are telling us in terms of that professionalisation and addressing those gaps that exist.
And one last promise. This is the one last point, but it's a sort of conversation that will go on forever. A podcast that never ends. We are a not-for-profit organisation. So we're seeking only to contribute to the success of this continent and everywhere we are in the world. This is not about us making money for anybody else. We are literally dedicated to making people and organizations and countries better. And that's our job. And we're excited to be getting on with it, and particularly excited to be doing it here.
Because we were also introduced to some amazing innovators at the conference in August who were doing incredible work, right? And also speaking about the need for professionalization, the right skill set, and that is where the gap is being plugged. A podcast that never ends, that's a very good idea. I like that. It's a catchy one, so perhaps we could rename the podcast.
Thing, yeah.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you very, very much for joining us on this episode. Ben Farrell, Global CEO of CIPS Africa, and Paul Vos, the Managing Director of CIPS Africa. And a big thank you to you for joining us. Do join us for our next episode, which will be airing soon. And so don't you touch that dial. Have yourselves a magic day further.
CIPS Africa Connect and Engage podcast.